Hello and welcome to the CNBC Africa Mandela Day special. I'm Chris Bishop. The day we celebrate this man.
There are many people who feel that it is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and non-violence against a government whose reply is only savage attacks.
And that was his famous interview underground in 1961, given to a British television news organisation. Now, this weekend, South Africans and many across the continent will celebrate Mandela Day. July the 18th would have been his 102nd birthday. CNBC Africa pays tribute to the man who emerged from 27 years in prison to guide a troubled South Africa to democracy. And in a few minutes, we'll be speaking to a man who worked with Mandela and knew him very well, South Africa's former Finance Minister, Nhlanhla Nene. But first, let's take a look into the background of the legacy of Nelson Mandela.
I was always amazed after we became friends what a good practical politician he was. He didn't spend all that time in prison thinking about his immortal soul. He spent some time thinking about how to make deals and get things done.
Words of respect from the former US President Bill Clinton. Like most world leaders of his day, Clinton had a healthy regard for his South African counterpart. Even those who came after Clinton pay their respects to the man's legacy.
I am one of the countless millions who drew inspiration from Nelson Mandela's life. My very first political action, the first thing I ever did that involved an issue or a policy or politics, was a protest against apartheid. I would study his words and his writings. The day he was released from prison gave me a sense of what human beings can do when they're guided by their hopes and not by their fears. And like so many around the globe, I cannot fully imagine my own life without the example that Nelson Mandela set. And so long as I live, I will do what I can to learn from him.
Nelson Mandela emerged from prison to be inaugurated at the Union Buildings in May 1994. He once joked that in many countries, presidents became prisoners. He said in South Africa, it worked the other way around. The former First Lady, Graça Machel, believes the legacy must live on in deeds as well as memories.
Many times we look at the government, we look at the private sector, we look at institutions as the ones who have to take initiative to transform our lives and to transform the lives of our communities. I think the Mandela Day is a reminder that any one of us has the power to take initiative, has the power to drive transformation. Madiba taught us something very important, even when he was a head of state, and particularly when he stepped down. That's when he went across the country, trying to identify villages and where there was no school, where there was no clinic, where there was no water, and on a personal commitment to make sure that he takes those services in collaboration with private sector, of course, but to care about people and use your power perhaps to bring the partnerships which can do something concrete. I think it's important for us to take that responsibility individually.
On July the 18th, it would have been Nelson Mandela's 102nd birthday. When Nelson Mandela was a young revolutionary, he spent most of his time out of the public eye, either underground or serving 27 years in prison. In the dark days of apartheid, his image and even his words were banned and kept from sight.
I have beautiful children and a beautiful wife. I want them to walk free in their own land.
It is a pleasing irony for many that in latter years his image and story has been all over the screens of the world in scores of films and documentaries. His image lives on in hundreds of books, memorabilia and gold coins, valuable enough to be auctioned before rich collectors.
Fellow South Africans, our beloved Nelson Mandela, the founding president of our democratic nation, has departed.
It is almost hard to believe that it's nearly 7 years since the great man passed away and the world wept. It is even sadder to think that on this day his daughter Zinzi was laid to rest in Johannesburg next to her mother Winnie long before her time. A legacy of lives of struggle that Nelson Mandela led with courage, humility and the simple belief that there is good in everyone. Chris Bishop, CNBC Africa. That's the legacy of Nelson Mandela. Well, I can tell you that once you met Nelson Mandela in the flesh, you never forgot him, and certainly he never forgot you. One of the things I'll never forget about the years I spent with him on the road as a journalist in Africa is that he always remembered what you talked about in the last time you'd spoken. Incredible, considering how many people he met in his years in power. Now, former Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene knew Nelson Mandela very well and worked with him for many years in government. Now, he comes to us live from his home in KwaZulu-Natal. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Nene. Now, one thing that's been rattling around my mind all these months of COVID-19 lockdown is, what do you think Nelson Mandela would have said and done about this pandemic we're all facing?
Thank you, Chris. First, I must just say I'm truly honored to have been asked to say something in commemoration and the celebration of, this global icon's life. In response to your question, and also may I say, as you know, I was only born in 1958, so one only knew of Mandela through the media, through the news, through the organizational communications during these years until his release in 1990. But I must say, his response to a situation or a crisis, whenever I need to respond to a question like that, I'm reminded of how he responded to the assassination of Comrade Chris Hani back in 1993, in the middle of the negotiations, when he actually came and rose to the occasion to mobilize the nation from all angles to be able to take up responsibility of making good out of a very difficult and dire situation. He was a man of very remarkable, leadership qualities, and I think he would have actually been the man of the time, even during this time. And I must say, the current president takes a lot from what I believe he learned from this gallant fighter and leader.
I mean, you think, I think back to that night, Easter 1993. I mean, the nation, a lot of people very angry, a lot of people were ready to take to the streets. And Nelson Mandela wasn't even head of state then. He went into the SABC studios of his own volition and he made that broadcast to the nation, which probably saved countless lives. Do you think that was his finest hour, you think? Or do you think that was yet to come?
Look, the man was ahead of his time, because if you think of that, taking advantage of, the media to address the nation at that time, not even being head of state, is what we do these days as we have this kind of celebration today, where we have virtual communications and having virtual meetings with the current president having had the Imbizos talking to the whole nation. So Madiba at that time just took advantage of a very difficult situation and turned it in the complete interest of the nation, because it was also a selfless deed. He could have actually ruined his own reputation, perhaps, if he had slipped, but he actually demonstrated those qualities, those leadership qualities that actually saved the nation from a bloody transformation period.
What about that day also in your home province when there was faction fighting and violence going on, and he went down to KwaZulu-Natal and he said to people, throw your pangas and weapons into the sea, and it actually worked? I mean, how many leaders do you think could have actually pulled that off?
That was very courageous of him, because coming to an angry crowd like the ANC at that time, when blood was flowing all over, to be able to say to people, take your weapons and throw them into the sea. And because of the respect he commanded amongst all sectors of society, that actually turned things around.
And everybody has a story about his wit and his personality as a one-to-one. I mean, I can remember once going to interview him, and I'd actually done my knee playing football. I was hobbling along and I couldn't keep up with him. As you remember, in his latter years, he couldn't move too fast. And he asked me what was wrong. I said I did my knee playing football. And then he said to me, well, perhaps I could suggest you take up boxing instead. Surely you must have a story like that in your years working with him.
Look, a number of times when we met with him, of course, we were meeting at very different levels, because he was a national leader and I was occupying leadership at a regional level in the organization. So we would bump into each other a number of times. I remember one day when we went to launch one of his projects, which was a high school in the deep rural Umsinga area. And, the man was actually down to earth, and we helped interact with a number of the elderly people in the area when the project was being launched. But 3 years down the line, when we met down in Cape Town, one of his remarkable attributes of good memory, he remembered that the last time we met was at that launch of that project. So he wanted to know how it was doing. And I had to give an account of how that project was proceeding. Very difficult one, though, because Umsinga is not very close to my place. And so I couldn't give a full account of the thing. But that actually made me realize how important it is to keep a record of, the milestones in life.
But as we both remember, I mean, Nelson Mandela, I've seen him lose his temper at least a couple of times. We both know that everyone thought of him as this gentle, genial elder statesman, but he could be very angry as well. Did you ever see that?
The first meeting that he held with us in KwaZulu-Natal in 1991, when he was coming to address us, we were all very late. All the comrades, some had come back from exile, and we were busy greeting and hugging outside. Meeting was supposed to start at 11. The man was there at 20 to 11. And we only, got down to sit down at around 11:30. So we were all about 30 minutes late to begin. He spent a good 45 minutes, lashing out at us that if we can't keep time, we are not even worthy of the title human beings. He went on. I was really shaken when he went on like that. But that's exactly the man he was.
I've got to ask you this question, though. I mean, in recent years, we've seen a lot of things in this country. We've seen the inquiries into what has happened to some of the state funds, etc. We've seen the economy struggling. We've seen many of the ideals that Nelson Mandela fought for being derailed. What do you think he would have thought about the present state of South Africa and its economy?
He must really be turning in his grave with all of those things happening, because he wouldn't take kindly to any form of depriving the poor of what was rightfully theirs. The selflessness with which he himself gave himself for the nation and for the world, and campaigning for human rights, right up to his bitter end. He really wouldn't have taken kindly to what is happening, and I would want to believe we owe it to him to return this country to its glorious days when leaders like him, when they gave their lives for it to be where it is. We really owe it to them. to do our best.
And that's the other thing as well. I mean, a lot of people talk about his legacy and maybe he gave up too much when he took power, but I mean, he still brought this country back from the brink of civil war, which would have been probably one of the most bloody that this continent's ever seen. What do you think when people do criticize his memory sometimes?
Look, I think everyone is entitled to their opinions with regards to the men that Nelson Mandela was. But, I still believe that he was one of the best leaders that the world has ever had. He was not only our leader here. Nobody will ever forget the manner in which he led the negotiations at CODESA that culminated in the birth of our democratic state and the reconstruction and development program that followed thereafter. The reconciliation process that earned him the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993. Who will ever forget, again, as I said, how he rose to the occasion when Comrade Chris Hani was assassinated in 1993, when he called for calm, but immediately also called for the expedition of the birth of our democracy. So I really think we actually should be proud as a nation to have had a leader in our shores who stood head and shoulders above and with people, the Martin Luthers of this world, the Mahatma Gandhis of this world. That's where he ranks, even in my view, above. So he is a leader, a global leader, a global icon worth celebrating. And I think many of us learned a lot from him that would actually sustain us. And when we talk about celebrating his 67 minutes, which accounts for the 67 years that he dedicated to the country and the world, if I were to say so, is one of the most celebrated and respected global leaders, where the United Nations General Assembly adopted the launch of this Mandela International Day, recognizing his contribution. And I think we owe it to him.
And its personality as well. I mean, it's something that everyone talks about. I mean, I was there the night in 1997 at the Organization of African Unity, before it was the African Union, when he announced the death of Mobutu Sese Seko of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I can still see his face now. And he said, it's always sad to see a comrade passing, even one who's given a lot of people a lot of problems down the years. And he smiled at his witticism. And any other leader who could have been castigated for that, smiling during the announcement of the death of a fellow head of state. But because it was Mandela, no one said anything. And do you think he always had that thing that a lot of people in the ANC said to me, well, it's Tata, it's Madiba, it's okay, you can get away with a lot more because of his personality?
Yes. No, that's very true. Because... I know at times there was a time when he called for young people from the age of 16 to be given the right to vote. A lot of people also, stood up but it was him. He had said it because that was what he strongly believed in, because he thought young people, you do not have to be in your 20s to actually be of sound mind. But there he was. He was that person who actually also spoke his mind and, believed in what he thought would. And that's why he's actually, his quotes, I think he's one of the most quoted statesmen in the world also, in terms of the things that he said and the things that he did that came directly from his heart, that actually, I can't remember. There was one of his quotes where he said, I've learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. How original and how, characteristic of him to come up with, coin such, phrases.
Thank you very much indeed. That was Nhlanhla Nene, the former Finance Minister of South Africa, speaking to us there about his views and memories on the late Nelson Mandela, who we are celebrating in this program. Thank you very much for talking to us from your rural home in KwaZulu-Natal. Now, one of the themes of Mandela Day is doing something to help your fellow citizen. Now, in this vein, a bunch of cyclists will be taken to the road this weekend to raise money for charity. Now, one of them is with me now, Wynand de Villiers. Thank you very much for joining me. So how far are you going to go? How fast and how many are there of you?
Well, Chris, it's all based on the main theme of Mandela Day, which is 67. So there are going to be, well, it looks like a couple of thousand cyclists at the moment. The initiative has grown so nicely. We're all going to hop on their bikes tomorrow morning, wherever they are in the country, and choosing a route and a course to suit their level of ability, and riding 67 kilometers. And during the course of this, making a difference to a couple of charities that we're raising funds for through the initiative. So, yeah, it started off with, we as the Hectic Promotions non-profit company, we arrange a few cycling races in the year. Our social media channels, various cyclists on Mandela Day, and at a point now where it looks like we've got cyclists from New Zealand, Australia, all over Africa that are going to take to their bikes tomorrow and complete 67 kilometers. And, quite amazed because it's quite chilly outside at this time of the year. But it shows you that there's a real commitment to Mandela Day within the cycling industry, and that it's turning out to be something really special.
What precautions are you having to take for this COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, sadly, it's not possible for us to organize staged events anymore, due to the social distancing regulations that we have to adhere to. But we are placing the responsibility on each and every cyclist tomorrow morning to be responsible amid COVID-19, to stick to their social distancing, to wear their PPE, protective equipment when they get onto the bicycles. I think a lot of them actually like wearing the masks at this time of the year because it's quite cold outside. There's a real sense of cyclists, and it's without having the ability to physically get the guys together to do the ride. So, yeah, I think it's like a normal training ride that the guys would have done, but I think the difference is tomorrow, I think a lot more people are making the effort to get out in the cold and to do the ride. And we'd like to, of course, invite as many people as possible to get onto the bandwagon. We've created a registration facility on a website called cycleevents.co.za. And if there's anybody out there that would like to join us tomorrow morning, go onto that website and go and register and just join us and support the cause and do something special on the day.
Thank you very much indeed. That was Wynand de Villiers, who's going to be out there cycling across Johannesburg to raise money for Mandela Day. And I say, a lot of people will talk about the man, his character, and also he always had time for children. And there's no surprise that in the year 2000, a very well-known children's television program at the time voted Nelson Mandela as their man of the century. And typically, the man himself characteristically went down to the studios for a chat. Behind all of this was Nelson Mandela's charm and connection with the people. When a children's program made him man of the 20th century, he was the coolest man in the studio in more ways than one.
In the countryside where I grew up, the most important game at the time was stick playing.
One of his trademark greetings was "Hello, young people," whether his audience was age 5 or 50. He always made time for children, even at a formal state banquet.
Mandela asking my daughters to dance and then dancing with them. Once we were at some function and he saw them and he said, "Come and dance." And the very little big-eyed girls kind of danced the famous Madiba shuffle with him.
Well, that's our CNBC Africa tribute to Nelson Mandela, a true man of the people. That's all we've got time for. From me, Chris Bishop, and the team, it's goodbye and enjoy Mandela Day.